The gravel bit into my palms when I hit the ground. That's the detail I always come back to. Not the sound my wrist made, not the way my vision went white at the edges, but the specific, stupid sharpness of those little rocks pressing into my skin while my husband stood over me and said nothing. He'd pushed me. I know that now, the way I know my own name. But in that moment, sprawled across the driveway of his parents' house in Scottsdale with the August heat radiating up from the concrete, I was still trying to convince myself it was an accident, that I'd tripped. But the look on his face wasn't satisfaction. "You're fine," he said. "Get up. My name is Haley. I'm 32 years old. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. The kind of middle-class, nothing spectacular upbringing where your parents stay married and you play soccer on Saturdays and you think that means you understand what love is supposed to look like. I was a pediatric nurse for 6 years. I know how to read pain levels. I know the difference between someone wincing and someone actually hurt. I was actually hurt. But I got up. Because that's what you do when you've spent 3 years being slowly convinced that your own perception of reality is broken. My husband's name was Cade. We met at a hospital fundraiser. He was charming in that easy, loud way that fills up a room. The kind of man who remembers your drink order after meeting you once and makes you feel like the only person at the party. I fell for it completely. We dated for 14 months and I thought I was the luckiest woman I knew. We got married in April. By the following January, I had stopped calling my best friend back because Cade said she was a bad influence. By March, I had quit my job because he said the night shifts were straining our marriage. By summer, I had no income of my own, no close friends left within reach, and I was spending most of my days alone in a house that was legally his, in a city I'd moved to for him, waiting for him to come home and decide what kind of evening we were going to have. Looking back, I can trace it so clearly, the slow replacement of my life with a version of my life that was entirely controlled by someone else. But when you're inside it, you can't see the shape of it. You're too busy managing. Too busy trying to be better so things will be better. The push happened at his parents' anniversary party. His younger brother, I'll call him by what he actually was, which is an accomplice, had been drinking since noon. His parents had money. Old Arizona real estate money, the kind that makes people feel untouchable in ways that seep into how they treat everyone around them. His mother had never fully accepted me. His father had never bothered to learn my last name. I'd overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. His brother, talking quietly near the side gate, on the phone with someone, saying Cade's name and a large number, and the word policy. I didn't understand it yet, but I pulled out my phone and I hit record before I fully understood why. When I asked Cade about it later, near the cars, he told me to drop it. I said I didn't think I could, and then his hand was on my shoulder and I was on the ground and my wrist was bent wrong and the gravel was in my palms and he was saying, "You're fine, get up." His mother watched from the patio. She turned back to her guests. The drive to urgent care, I made myself. Cade said he wasn't going to waste his evening on my clumsiness. The PA who saw me, a young woman with tired eyes and absolutely no patience for vague stories, looked at the x-ray, looked at my face, and said, "How did this happen again?" And something about the way she asked it the second time made me tell the truth. She didn't fix everything that night. She couldn't. But she handed me a card for a local DV resource center and she documented my injuries with photographs and she wrote in my chart what I'd told her. That was the first piece. I didn't know then that I was building something. I thought I was just surviving the night. I went home. I told Cade the wrist was sprained, nothing major. He didn't apologize, but he was nicer for about 4 days, which is its own kind of cruelty. That 4-day window that makes you think you were the problem all along, because look, things are better now. It must have been something you did. I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow. I need you to understand something about the life insurance piece because this is where it stops being a story about a bad marriage and becomes something else entirely. 3 weeks after the party, I was helping Cade find a document for his tax guy. He was the kind of man who outsourced his own organization to his wife and then blamed her when things were disorganized. And I found a folder in his home office that I'd never seen before. Inside it was a life insurance policy. My name was on it. The beneficiary was Cade. The policy was 18 months old. The coverage amount was $400,000. I stood in that office for a long time. I thought about the push. I thought about the word policy on his brother's phone call. I thought about the drive to urgent care alone, and the way Cade hadn't asked once how my wrist was doing. I thought about the fact that in the last year, there had been 2 other incidents I'd explained away. A fall down the stairs I'd been standing at the top of. A car accident where the brakes had felt, for just a second, like they weren't responding the way they should. I had explained them all away. I photographed every page of that policy. I put the folder back exactly as I'd found it. I went to the kitchen and I made dinner and I set the table, and I did not let my hands shake. That night I called my sister. She's 4 years older than me and she lives in Nashville, and she is the person who, when I told her I was marrying Cade, had paused for just a beat too long before saying, "He makes you happy." I hadn't talked to her in almost 8 months. When she picked up and heard my voice, she just said, "Tell me where you are." I couldn't leave yet. I knew that much from the reading I'd been quietly doing, in private browser windows, in the Notes app on my phone with the passcode Cade didn't know. Leaving badly is more dangerous than leaving well. The statistics on intimate partner violence are not abstract to me. I am a nurse, or I was, and I knew what the numbers said about the window right after separation. So I planned. My sister wired money to an account Cade didn't know about at a bank we'd never used together, under a new email address. Small amounts at first, then larger ones as the weeks went on. I reached out to the DV center whose card I'd kept folded in my winter coat pocket. They connected me with a legal advocate named Ms. Ferris, who had the demeanor of someone who had heard everything and was surprised by nothing, and who walked me through what documentation would matter in court. I recorded conversations. Not all of them, just the ones where Cade said things that, outside the bubble of our marriage, would make anyone's blood run cold. I kept a written log on a cheap notebook I bought with cash and stored at my sister's P.O. box. Dates, times, what happened, what was said, photographs of any marks, the PA's report from urgent care, the insurance policy, the phone recording from the party. I worked for 3 months. I still cooked dinner. I still asked about his day. I got so good at the performance that some nights I frightened myself. His brother was the one who finally made it fall apart faster than I expected. He had a gambling problem. This I'd known vaguely. The way you know things in a family you're not fully let into. And he'd apparently been borrowing money from Cade for years. The insurance payout, I would later learn, was partly meant to cover those debts. His brother had been in on the plan from the beginning, or at least from some point along the way when Cade had decided that a divorce would be too expensive and a wife's death would be more profitable. I only know this because the FBI got there first. I didn't know there was a federal investigation when I called the local police. I had driven myself to the station on a Tuesday morning with a manila envelope containing everything I'd collected, and I asked to speak to a detective. What I didn't know was that Cade's brother had been on the radar of a financial crimes unit for months, and that one of the threads they were pulling had begun to unravel something larger. When the detective saw my documentation and made a phone call that brought 2 other people into the room within 20 minutes, I understood that my small, private act of survival had just intersected with something much bigger. It took 6 weeks from that Tuesday to the arrest, 6 weeks of going home, of making dinner, of sleeping next to a man who was being investigated for conspiracy and fraud, and, once they started digging, for what the detective would later describe to me as a pattern of behavior that suggests this was not the first time and you were not the first target. I cannot tell you what those 6 weeks felt like except to say that I have sat with very sick children who were waiting for diagnoses. And I know what it is to hold a calm face over genuine terror. I called on every bit of that training. I did not break. The morning they came, I was at my sister's. I had finally left 12 days earlier, in the middle of a Wednesday, while Cade was at a lunch meeting. I took my documents, my grandmother's earrings, my nursing license, and 3 changes of clothes. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. I was sitting on my sister's couch in Nashville when my phone rang and the detective told me they had him. His brother had been picked up an hour earlier. Their father, who had known and said nothing, who had watched me get up off that driveway and turn back to his party. He was being interviewed. I remember I didn't cry right away. I just sat there with my sister's dog on my feet and the phone in my hand, and I thought about the PA who had asked me twice how it happened, about the card she'd given me, about the first night I typed, Is it normal for your husband to in search bar and then deleted it because I was afraid Cade would see the history? All those small moments. Each one felt like nothing at the time. Together, they were the thing that saved my life. Cade was charged with domestic battery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and one count related to the insurance policy that his attorney later tried to characterize as a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding argument did not go well, partly because of the recording from the party, and partly because when investigators looked into the car accident 18 months ago, they found something in the brake line that a mechanic had noted at the time and flagged as unusual. And then, somehow, the paperwork had gotten lost. It was not lost anymore. His brother took a plea deal. He cooperated. Whatever he told them, it was enough to make Cade's attorney go very quiet in the weeks before trial. Cade pled guilty to 2 charges. He is currently serving time in a federal facility in Arizona. His parents lost the house. It turns out some of the real estate money had been structured in ways that became legally complicated once investigators started looking. I did not feel sorry for them. I have tried, once or twice in a theoretical from a distance way, to feel something like sorry for them. I don't. The doctor who treated me at urgent care, the PA, technically, was called to testify. The documentation she'd created that night, the photographs, the chart notes, the way she'd recorded my exact words. It mattered. It was used. I sent her a card afterward. I don't know if she ever received it, but I needed to send it. My wrist still aches in cold weather. I'm back in Columbus now, in an apartment I chose myself, on a street I like, with a commute I picked because it goes past a good coffee shop. I'm working again. I went back to pediatric nursing, which surprised some people who thought maybe I'd want a clean break from anything high stakes, but I think they misunderstand why I became a nurse in the first place. I am good at staying calm. I am good at watching for the signs that something is wrong. I do not look away when something doesn't add up. I am in therapy. That part is not dramatic or interesting, but it is the most important thing I do each week. I spent 3 years being convinced that my instincts were broken, and it turns out my instincts were the only thing that was working the whole time. Rebuilding trust in yourself after that is its own long project. My sister visited last month. We sat on my small balcony and drank wine, and she asked me if I could identify the moment I knew, the real moment, not the push, not the insurance policy, but the moment underneath all of that, when I understood what was happening to me. I thought about it for a while. I think it was the 4-day window after the push. That stretch of niceness that was meant to reset me, because I remember sitting at our kitchen table on the 3rd day, watching Cade talk about something on the news, and I had this very small, very quiet thought. He is performing. He is performing being normal, and it used to look real, and now I can see the seams. That thought was a crack in the glass. Everything that came after came through that crack. If you are reading this or hearing this, and something in your chest is recognizing a pattern, the managing, the explaining away, the performance of being fine, I want to say something clearly. Your instincts are not broken. You have not imagined it. The card that some kind stranger hands you matters. The thing you record on your phone matters. The notebook matters. The P.O. box matters. Document everything. Talk to someone outside the house. Find the crack in the glass and let the light in. You are not imagining it, and you are not alone. People ask me sometimes what the turning point was. They expect me to say the push or the insurance policy or the morning the detective called. But it wasn't any of those things. The real turning point was the moment I stopped explaining Cade's behavior to myself and just let myself see it. That sounds simple. It was not simple. It took 3 years of being slowly unwound from my own instincts before I understood how thoroughly I had been trained to distrust myself. Every time I felt something was wrong, there was a ready explanation. Every time I pulled back, there was a 4-day window of warmth that reset the clock. That's not an accident. That's a system. And the person running that system was very good at it. What I've come to understand, not from a book, not from a therapist's framework, though therapy helped, is that actions compound. Cade's cruelty didn't arrive fully formed. It built on itself, each small concession he extracted from me making the next one easier. The friends I stopped calling, the job I left, the city I moved to, each one seems like a reasonable choice at the time. Together, they were architecture of isolation, built brick by brick, disguised as love. And the same is true in reverse. My survival didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It was the PA who documented my injuries and handed me a card. It was the winter coat pocket where I kept that card for 6 weeks before I used it. It was the private browser window, and then the notes app, and then the phone call to my sister after 8 months of silence. It was Ms. Milas Ferris, who had heard everything and was surprised by nothing, who told me what mattered in court. Every small act of self-preservation compounded the same way Cade's control had quietly, incrementally, until there was enough to hold. That's the thing about courage that nobody tells you. It doesn't usually feel like courage while you're doing it. It feels like just getting through the day. It feels like keeping your hands steady while you photograph documents in your husband's home office. It feels like making dinner and asking about his day when everything inside you is screaming. Courage, in the situations that actually require it, looks a lot like ordinary, unglamorous endurance. And intelligence, real intelligence, is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about paying attention when something doesn't add up, and not talking yourself out of what you noticed. I was a nurse. I knew how to read a situation. I had let someone convince me that skill didn't apply to my own life. Taking it back, trusting my own read again, was an act of intelligence that took more effort than anything I'd done in a classroom. I think about the ER nurse sometimes. She asked me twice because she was paying attention. She let her instincts run, even when the easier thing would have been to fill out the chart and move on. That choice, that small, quiet refusal to look away, is part of why I'm here. Whatever situation you are in, you already have more than you think. You have your observations. You have your pattern recognition. You have the small things you've noticed and filed away because they didn't fit. Start there. Document what you see. Trust what you know. The evidence you build quietly, day by day, will outlast anyone who is betting on your silence. Cade bet on my silence. He lost.